I'll jump to the agenda for today since I don't have a lot of time. I'm going to cover what are the digital health technologies and what are the benefits of the digital health technologies and the different types of digital products and the definition of medical device in the US and some of the examples of excluded devices software. And some regulatory considerations on how does FDA regulates the mobile medical apps and some of the functions that are not considered as medical devices in the US and some software functions that FDA intends to exercise enforcement discretion. And then I'm going to explain what the enforcement discretion means from the FDA's perspective and followed by software functions that are not the focus of FDA's oversight. And after that, I'm going to touch a little bit of the definition of a medical device per the EU medical device regulations and talk about if your software is considered as a medical device in the European Union and some of the considerations from the regulatory perspective when you design a mobile medical app. And then I'll take some questions. Basic technologies use computing platforms, connectivity, software, and the uses. There are a very wide range of the technology and how it could be applied. And it could be just the general awareness, or it could be considered as a medical device. And sorry, the technology could be used as a medical product in a medical product, or as a companion diagnostic, or as an accessory to an existing medical product. And they could also be used to develop or study medical products. For instance, they can be used in different clinical trials to help reach the clinical trial endpoints. So those all fall under the umbrella of digital health technologies. It could be the mobile health, it could be the health information technology, could be wearable devices or telemedicine or even personalized medicine. So what are the benefits of the digital health technologies? Digital tools, they can give providers a more holistic view of patient health through access to data and giving patients more control over their health. And the digital health offers real opportunities to improve medical outcomes and enhance efficiency. So they could empower consumers to make better informed decisions about their own health and also provide new options for facilitating prevention, early diagnosis of life-threatening diseases, and management of chronic conditions outside of traditional healthcare settings. So, so they could help the stakeholders to reduce inefficiencies, improve access, reduce cost, and increase quality and make medicine more personalized for patients. So those are the benefits of it, and the patients and consumers can also use digital health technologies to better manage and track their health and wellness related activities. So this is an overview of different types of digital products. Currently, there are 3 different categories of digital products. It could be software as a medical device, software in a medical device, or is one example. So this is an Apple Watch, and device, while the watch is just a platform that supports different applications to running. And so in this scenario, if the software intends for one or more medical uses that run on different operating system or in virtual environment, then it could be considered as a medical device. And that's a standalone software. If the software run on a hardware medical device when it's not part of the intended use of the hardware medical device, in that case, the software could also be considered as a standalone medical device. Sorry, next I'm going to talk about software in a medical device. So if the software could power the mechanics of a medical device or processes the information that's produced by a medical device, then the software is considered in a medical a software in a medical device. In that case, the software and the hardware are forming one medical device together as a system. And another case is the software could also control the medical device remotely. For instance, like this one, the software could control the medical device via Bluetooth, and in that case, they also form a system and they work together as a medical device. The software could also connect to the medical device wirelessly through Wi-Fi or Bluetooth. So in those scenarios, you would consider the software as in a medical device, but the software and the hardware together are considered as a medical device as a system. The third scenario is non-medical device software. So if the software, sorry, if the software product do not meet the definition of a medical device and they are not subject to other health authority regulations or expectations, then the software is not considered as a medical device. Usually, if the software doesn't fall under the first and second scenario, then it's not considered as a medical device. So here is the definition of a medical device in the US per the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. I highlighted some of the key points. So one thing I wanted to point out is if it's intended for use in the diagnosis of the disease or other conditions, then it could be considered as a medical device. And the definition covers not only human, it also covers animals. So that's very different from some definitions. For instance, in the EU medical device regulations, they excluded the diagnosis of animals, and they only focus on human. But within the US, if it's for animal diagnosis, it still falls under the definition of a medical device, and FDA still regulates the same way as they regulate human use products. And also, if it affects the structure of any function of the body of man or other animals, then they would be regulated as a medical device. But there are some exclusions that's covered under the section 520. So I give some examples to show what software would be excluded under the section 520. If it's administrative support of a healthcare facility, or if it's maintaining or encouraging a healthy lifestyle unrelated to the diagnosis, cure, mitigation, prevention, or treatment of a disease or condition, then it's not covered by the definition of a medical device. And or if it's electronic patient record, or if it transfers, storing, converting formats, or displaying tests or other device data, results, or findings, but not intended to interpret or analyze them, then those are also excluded. Sorry. So here are some regulatory considerations. How does the FDA regulate mobile medical apps? So FDA had some definitions for the mobile apps and the mobile medical apps, and the mobile apps have a much broader definition based on FDA's perspective. But for the mobile medical apps, they have to be they have to meet the definition of a medical device, and they could be an accessory of a regulated medical device, or they could transform a mobile platform into a regulated medical device. And in those cases, they all become regulated by the FDA. And and when FDA steps into regulating those mobile medical applications, they still use a risk-based approach as the way they regulate other medical devices. And what they do is they basically classify the mobile medical apps based on the level of risk it poses to the patients, and they classify them into like low risk, which would be class 1, moderate risk, which would be class 2, and high risk, which would be class 3. And based on that, FDA applied different approaches on how they would regulate those products. So they could be not medical devices, but they could be medical devices, but FDA intends to exercise enforcement discretion, and they can be medical devices and also the focus of FDA oversight. So I'm going to talk about those different scenarios. If the software functions are not medical devices, then it doesn't meet the medical device definition, and FDA doesn't regulate them as medical devices. So here are some of the examples I listed. The first example is software functions that provide patients with simple tools to organize and track their health information, or software functions that provide easy access to information related to patients' health conditions or treatments, or software functions that enable during an encounter a healthcare provider to access their patient's personal health record that's hosted on a web-based or other platform. The second condition is the software functions for which the FDA intends to exercise enforcement discretion. So for many software functions that meet the regulatory definition of a medical device, but they have minimum risk to patients and consumers, FDA will exercise enforcement discretion, and they will not expect manufacturers to submit the pre-market application or to register and list their software with FDA. So this includes the softwares that help patients or users self-manage their disease or condition without providing specific treatment suggestions, or automate simple tasks for healthcare providers. So what exactly does enforcement discretion mean? It means that the FDA would recommend that the manufacturers follow the quality system regulations for the software. That could be device software functions, but the FDA intends to exercise enforcement discretion. And manufacturers could have in place an adequate quality management system that helps to ensure their products consistently meet the applicable requirements and the specifications, and also support the software throughout the total life cycle. And also FDA has an approach of harmonizing their quality system regulations with the international standards such as ISO 13485. So the last scenario is the device software functions that are the focus of FDA's oversight. Basically, if your software becomes either the class 2 or class 3 devices, based on the FDA's risk-based approach, then FDA would expect you to send an application. It could be the 510K application or the PMA application. Under each scenario, you need to receive FDA's clearance or approval before you could start commercializing the software. And the FDA's device software function and mobile medical application policy doesn't require software developers to seek FDA's re-evaluation for minor or iterative product changes. So when you make some change, some minor change, you could still utilize the internal change control process to manage it, and you don't need to submit a new application. So next, I'm going to touch a little bit of the definition of a medical device per the EU medical device regulations. And I'm not going to read the whole definition, but I wanted to point out that under the EU MDR, they also included the software as a medical device. And sorry, from here you can see that they only consider software that's for human being use. They don't consider any type of animal use software as a medical device. And it has to meet some of the medical purposes like the diagnosis, monitoring, treatment, prevention, or prediction of a disease. And in the EU MDR, they also have a risk-based approach to assess the classification of your product, and you follow different submission pathways to get the approval from the notified body before you can commercialize your product. So, so here is a flow chart that's published from the medical device software, which tells you how you can decide if your software is considered as a medical device under the EU MDR or not, and if it's considered as a medical device, is that covered by the EU MDR or the EU IVDR? Here's some of the considerations for mobile medical app regulations. So when a company creates the app functions, they have to consider where they want to market their application. If they want to market in the US or in the EU or Canada or UK or some other countries. And then the regulations may change if the company has a very long pipeline. Let's say in a pharmaceutical company like Merck, we have 7 or 8 years of pipeline before we launch the product. And during that long pipeline, the regulations could change. And that the impact is when you create a mobile application, you have to also adapt to the new application before you could commercialize your product. And that's like a potential risk to consider. Another point is the software could be classified as a medical device, but under enforcement discretion in US. That means if you have a software that's considered as a medical device in the US, but because the risk level is too low, then it's only falling under the enforcement discretion. But because the requirements of enforcement discretion is also very new, it started after the COVID that FDA had a lot of requests and felt overburdened. So they created this enforcement discretion category to regulate low risk software. But if the enforcement discretion requirements is changed from the FDA, which could happen then you have to also consider doing some reevaluation and assess against the new criteria accordingly. Another thing is the medical device labeling requirements could be different from the drug labeling requirements. So if you have a combination product, or if you have mobile medical app that could go with some drug products, you have to consider that when you label them, you need to follow both the drug labeling requirements and the device labeling requirements. The last point I wanted to bring up is the mobile app functions could start as a non-medical device, but then have medical device functions added. All the mobile app functions could start as non-medical devices in some countries, but later being classified as medical devices in other countries during the market expansion. So that's all I have for today, and I'm going to take some questions.